Hello, welcome to Freaking Out about Cincinnati's opening day with Randy Freking, the podcast about the history and celebrations of Cincinnati's most revered non-religious holiday. Today, I decided to flip the script a little bit and have my good friend Dan Carruthers. He runs Play Audio Agency in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so today, Dan is going to interview me about the last 5 years of opening day history since we left off in 2018. And we're going to talk about some of our memories from opening day, some of my memories, some of Dan's, and we'll take it from there. And with that, I would like to introduce Dan Carruthers.
Thanks for having me today. As you know, I'm a huge Reds fan.
Yes, you are.
We've been producing your podcast now for some time, since you started in 2019, I believe, 2018, something like that. I think we did your Reds podcast, and then you were like, hey, we probably should do a podcast for the business as well.
Yeah, we were freaking out about work.
We were freaking out about work, literally, from time to time.
Correct.
But anyhow, well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. And so, yeah, I just want to bring the listeners up to date on what happened in the last 5 years, 2019 through 2023. And then you and I can just talk about opening day. How about your experience with opening day?
Well, I moved here in 1992, and I moved here from Phoenix, Arizona. And so the Diamondbacks weren't really a thing at the time. But ironically, I grew up in Northern Illinois, but I grew up as a Reds fan because I played a lot of baseball. I ended up playing in college. And I started out as a shortstop, but they moved me to catcher at age 13. It was like, this guy's got a little bit of promise. That's the easiest way to elevate through the system. Catchers were harder to find, still are. And so I moved to catcher. So this was 1972, and of course, the best catcher in the world was Johnny Bench. So I wore number 5. I loved the Reds. My father was a great baseball player coming up, so he loved great teams. He despised bad teams, like our own Chicago Cubs. And he said, Danny, if you're going to follow a team, I really like these Cincinnati Reds. And that Johnny Bench is a hell of a catcher. So I said, okay, that sounds good to me. And so I wore number 5 and became a Reds fan.
It's funny you say you're a catcher because I bumped into Pete Rose once at the Ballpark Cafe, Pete Rose Ballpark Cafe in Boca Raton, Florida. I was down there with my son for some reason, and he was young. And Pete said one thing to him. He looked him straight in the eye. He said, son, if you want to make it to the major leagues, be a catcher. Now, of course, my son never became a catcher. He was a good first baseman, left fielder, DH, played some college ball, had a great career. But how about opening day? Have you attended any opening days?
I have attended, since we've been here, 1992. That would give me how many opportunities?
That would give you about 31 or so.
Opportunities. I'm going to say that I've been to around 20.
That's pretty good.
And I've been on a string of 15 of 16. So I missed 1 year for spring break. My wife got the final say. I was trying to get us home in time, and it didn't happen. So that was bad. We need to get you up on the scoreboard this year. I don't know if the Reds require them to be consecutive, but they always put up there a long time attendees of opening day. Wow, I would have assumed that I wouldn't be near the top of that list. But
well, you're not near the top of the list. Come on, brother. I mean, Dan, I've only been going since 1967. So this year I get to say I've been to 57.
Gotcha. Wow.
And I leave one out only because of the COVID year that we'll talk about.
Yeah. So this would be like an inside job where you just get me up there anyhow.
Right,
just
exactly.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
I can pull some string.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Well, back to the opening day story. Probably my favorite opening day story. My daughter, Mia, is a singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and she was on a show called Taking the Stage. It was produced by Nick Lachey, a famous Cincinnatian.
Sure.
And it followed the lives of 6 students at the School for the Creative and Performing Arts. And Mia was sort of a breakout, star of that show. Singer-songwriter, 17 years old, was really getting a following from the show. And so the Reds invited her to sing the national anthem for opening day. I just got chills talking about it.
That's unbelievable.
I also got chills that day because it was like 38 degrees. But
that was like 10, 15 years ago?
Yes, it was 2009, 2010. I think 2010. And it was a really, really cold day. Mia had sung the national anthem for the Cyclones about a week prior. So she, was used to the cold, had to walk out onto the ice, almost fell. That was unbelievable. She her balance. She really impressed me with her balance. I mean, it looked like something out of a cartoon, but she caught herself. Probably broke the ice. No pun intended. Well, I thought it was funny how they had a mat out there, but she had to walk across the ice to get to the mat. So she did a great job there. It was kind of like a dress rehearsal, if you will, for the Reds, which was a week later. And that, like I said, woke up that day and it was cold. And I just remember she was fussing over her outfit. And I was like, man, we gotta get there. They wanted us to be there at a certain time. So, of course, then we got on traffic. We got on Columbia Parkway. And, of course, it was backed up. And so was nervous that we were running late. So we finally got downtown. And I got within like a block of the stadium, and my wife took the wheel. Mia and I jumped out of the car, and we ran to the stadium. And the cops were holding people back, and I'm like, she's singing the national anthem. We got to get there. We're late. So one of the policemen allowed us to get through. We got in there, and then my son joined us shortly thereafter, and had my little daughter at the time, who was, I think, only 2. And my son and I are now in the back rooms of Great American Ballpark and just as excited as we could be, whereas my daughter has a pitch pipe and is practicing in her head and couldn't be more nervous, going to be singing the national anthem.
Right, I can't
50,000
imagine.
people, right? That's 17 years old. So long story short, we get out there and now starting to sort of spit, rain, snow, sleet,
Right.
It was not a good day at all. And I just remember her walking out and Dusty Baker looking over and giving her a big smile. And I think that really calmed her down. And then Brandon Phillips said, I know you from that show.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so it really, really calmed her down. And she did a phenomenal job of the national anthem. And I just remember her being so elated when it was over. And we got to go to our seats and had a wonderful day. The Reds did lose that day to the Cardinals, but we had a wonderful experience.
Well, that rings a bell because I'm pretty sure either in my book about opening day or in the podcast, when I summarize the seasons, I used to talk about what happened pregame, et cetera, with the parade and who was singing the national anthem. Sometimes I would include it, sometimes I wouldn't. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty sure I included Mia in my episode about 2009 and remarked about, hey, we had a 17-year-old out there who belted it out and did a great job.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I was so proud of her. We're into it. We love it. We loved it before she, could sing. And so never in our wildest dreams did we think that one of us would be singing for opening day for the Reds. And she just, like I said, she nailed it. And we were so proud of her and just wishing that they would call us back again so we could have the same experience.
One of these years, they'll be back in the World Series. It only happens once every 30 years if you're an average MLB team. We got a little spoiled in the 70s and the 90s, even back in the 60s. We had 4 or 5 World Series in the span of 30 years. There's 30 teams.
Yeah.
Well, I guess 15 in the National League. So it should be once every 15 years. You should make it to the World Series on average.
Yeah, we're sort of behind that trend now.
The good news is we get opening day at home every year.
Every year, yep.
No other professional sports team in any sport has that honor to open at home every year.
I love that about this town, and I can't believe that I even ended up in Cincinnati. It was just happenstance with my job, but what an amazing tradition. And I'm glad that they were willing to award the country's first professional baseball team with that honor. It's pretty amazing.
We almost lost it back in the 1930s, but we kept it. Mm-hmm. So that's great. It could have been different. It could have been Pittsburgh. Who knows?
Oh, that would have been horrible.
They would have had to alternate. Yeah, it's great. We get it every year, so we can always plan on the Reds opening at home.
Yeah.
Although there's been some exceptions, one of which occurred during the last 5 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. You know, in listening to your show, your previous shows, one thing that I found was amazing, that the names of the teams that we were playing, so the mascot of the teams in the National League back in the day when baseball just started, it wasn't until 1902 that they played a team that we would recognize today. And I think it was maybe the Pirates, maybe 1892, something like that. I heard that on one of your shows. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Was the Pirates in 1892 perhaps?
Yeah, I'm not so sure if it was the Pirates. I think the Chicago team eventually became the Cubs.
They were the Colts, right?
They were the Colts and then the Cubs. I think the Cleveland team was the Spiders for a while.
Spiders. We played the Pittsburgh Alleghenies, right?
Right.
And so
all sorts of crazy things.
Yeah, and I think I'm sort of probably getting ahead of what you're going to talk about, but in catching up. But the COVID year, where opening day happened in July, I think it was the first time that we played the Tigers, didn't we? On opening
played
day?
the Tigers.
So we played
an
American League team on opening day.
Yeah.
That's probably the first of its kind, I'm guessing, huh?
No, we played the Angels.
Oh, did we?
Somewhere in between 2010, 2019.
Okay. I knew you'd
we
be the
did
guy
play
to
the
ask.
Tigers.
Okay.
During the COVID year, July of 2020.
Okay.
Which was at least a victory, you know?
Yes.
We'll talk about that.
We shall. You wanted to catch us up today.
Right.
And so what can I do to help facilitate this along the way today while you're catching up our fans on the history of opening day?
I don't know what you can do, Dan, but I'll tell you what I've been doing. It feels like a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been planning our annual opening day eve party, which this year and I think in future years will be at the Moorline Lager House.
Mm-hmm.
It's the night before opening day. All the proceeds benefit the Reds Community Fund. We've been doing this since 2012. We've got a great website with all the details called openingdayeve.com.
Okay. So www.openingdayeve.com. That's where listeners should go.
Yes, absolutely. They can make a donation there to gain entrance to this great party. My wife and I have off and on since 1983, we've been having an opening day eve party at our home with just our friends. And then one year, she or I looked at each other and said, why don't we raise some money for a charity in town from these fine people that come over and drink our beer and eat our food, et cetera. And one of us came up with the idea of the charity being the Reds Community Fund. So in 2012, we actually moved our party down to the Phoenix in downtown Cincinnati, close to your agency.
Mm-hmm.
We charged $10 a head. We raised $3,000. And since then, it's grown every year. And we're hoping to raise about $50,000, $60,000 this year for the Reds Community Fund. And we'll get a great crowd. We got Molly Wellman, the famous
mixologist.
The mixologist. John's going to make an appearance at the Moorline Lager House. A lot of celebrities. The best news is we've tried to keep it reasonable. You get really good food at the Moorline Lager House.
Sure.
So it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
The beers and cocktails are really good.
Yeah.
And so we've managed to keep the ticket price at $49.
Wow.
So that's pretty good.
That's really good.
For a lot of fun. We get the mascots show up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure the 1869 Red Stockings are going to be risen from the dead. They're going to stroll through the facility.
Love to see that.
But, it's an annual party, so it's, the night before opening day. It's called the Opening Day Eve Party. It's a great time. The public's welcome.
Is it open to all ages, Randy?
Or
is it a 21 plus?
It's interesting. We used to have it at the Reds Youth Academy out in Bond Hill, and we had kids out there. They'd be playing with the mascots, and it was so much fun. And we had batting cages. So it was sort of kids of all ages, although 90% of the crowd was adults. I think this year and future years, it's going to be more adult oriented.
Yeah, night out.
And it's the night, before the game, and the game is typically on a Thursday now, so they're probably tucked away in bed.
Sure. Absolutely. Where they should be.
Where they should be.
Mom and dad know that the next day is probably one of the biggest days of the year.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe their lives.
They've got to get their sleep so they can go to their dental appointment the next day or their doctor's appointment and attend the opening day parade. That's what I did throughout my childhood. My mom and dad would dutifully write a little note. Randy has a dental appointment. He will not make school on such and such day.
Sure. Yep.
And everybody was kind of a wink and a nod. Everybody knew what you were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, now it's like I'm sure your teachers were like, Randy has these great teeth, because they're very persistent about his appointments.
That's right.
They never ever miss. I should probably just schedule my cleaning on that day every year.
Oh, absolutely. You definitely need your teeth cleaned.
You do.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
It gets kind of crowded at the dentist on opening day. There's a lot of funerals. A lot of grandparents have passed away several times right around opening day.
Yeah, the crowded, not crowded deal.
Right.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh.
So what do you recall? What do you recall from that COVID year? That was odd. That's kind of when we trailed off, right?
Yeah, well, the year before that.
Yeah.
So last year we did was 2018. 2019 was a regular year. Yeah. We had all the fanfare with Findlay Market, all the parties around town. The banks were packed. The Reds Community Fund had their block party, and the Reds were still rebuilding. Mm-hmm. So there was no real excitement about the Reds that year. It was excitement about these kids they were bringing up or these newcomers they had. And then on opening day that year, the two stars were Jose Iglesias.
Oh, yeah.
Great shortstop, right? Mm-hmm. Great defender. I really can't believe they let him go, but we've got a pretty good one now in Ellie, I think. He and Derek Dietrich. I almost forgot about Derek Dietrich, but I was doing my research, and I remember this like it was yesterday. They were losing 2-1, and David Bell called Derek Dietrich up the pinch hit like in the 7th inning, and he hits this 2-run bomb. Nobody had ever heard of Derek Dietrich, and all of a sudden, he's the star of opening day. And really, in recent memory, it's probably one of the more exciting opening days we've had.
Sure.
It was a come-from-behind win.
Yeah. Wow.
And we haven't had a lot of wins on opening day in the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm. One that I remember, this is actually one that I wasn't there. We were in California, and I want to say I wasn't supposed to be, I know that if I'm with my family, I'm not supposed to be checking my phone all the time, even on opening day, which doesn't seem right to me, but I try to follow the rules. And I remember looking at the score, and it might have been the 7th inning or something like that, and we were down like 5 runs. We came back and won in the 8th or the 9th with 5 or 6 runs. Do you remember that game?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember that I turned, I didn't even look because I'm like, well, this game's over. Maybe Milwaukee or somebody like that.
It's never over until it's over in baseball.
Right.
That's the beauty of it. We used to say there's no clock in baseball. Now we realize there's a pitch clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you never know what's going to happen in a game.
No, that's true.
I was at a Reds-Indians game years ago where they were trailing 5 or 6 runs in the bottom of the 9th, and Adam Dunn hits a grand slam in the bottom of the 9th to win the game, and you're just like, hey, good thing we didn't leave.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I told when my kids were little, and they were like, why is everybody leaving? They didn't understand that. And when you're a lover of baseball, you don't leave because you don't want to miss the biggest comeback that ever occurred. You don't really care what the score is. You always hold out hope. Right?
Yeah.
And so you'd see this mass exodus in the 7th or the 8th. And my son was little. We had just moved here. And he said, why is everybody leaving? I'm like, they're not real fans.
Marty used to call those rats off of a sinking ship.
He had a way with words.
Sometimes the rats should have stayed and saw these great comebacks.
Yes.
Yeah, but you mentioned the COVID year.
Yeah.
You know, that was weird. It was like the start of 3 consecutive strange years. And, you know, as luck would have it with the Reds, I don't know if you remember this, Dan, but 2020 was the COVID year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in December of 19, they spent $64 million on Mike Moustakas.
Yeah.
Then they spent $15 million on Wade Miley. Then they signed Shogo Akiyama.
Yeah.
You know, I almost forget about him, but he was going to be a big guy. They signed him for $21 million. And then the same month, they signed, they brought Trevor Bauer back for $17.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Lorenzen signed the big contract. DeSclafani signed the big contract.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of January, they signed Nick Castellanos for 4 years, $64 million. I didn't even add those numbers up, but they spent somewhere between 150 or committed to 150 to $200 million. That was going to be our year, right? And then all of a sudden in March, Rob Manfred steps up to the podium in New York and says, we're going to delay the baseball season because of COVID. You know, this was right when the, remember the NBA shut down?
Yeah.
The NC2A tournament did.
Oh, gosh. And that was the year that Dayton had the #1 team in the country. So it was, you know, a local, you know, not baseball, but certainly a local story. The Dayton Flyers had the #1 team in the country, didn't get to do the tournament.
So they were the national champions in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, CBS did a simulation.
Did
one of those computerized simulations, and they won.
Did they?
So I always regard the Flyers as the national champions in 2020. I really think they ought to hang a banner up there.
I was just going to say,
Arena.
Yeah, they could simulate it. You know?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Maybe it's just a digital banner,
right? I was going to say
online,
a simulated banner.
Sorry, I'll get us off track again. But
you know, but then you go, you know, so they don't start till July. I think it was 27th or something like that against the Tigers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was weird. I remember I went down there that morning and like nothing is happening. It was the weirdest feeling in the world. You know, there's no parade. There was hardly anybody around. There were people milling around in red shirts.
Yeah.
It was nuts. A friend of mine who works for the Reds Community Fund, Charlie Frank, a great human being, he knew of my streak. And I don't know if you remember this, they were selling cutouts to place in the stands when there was nobody there.
That's right. Yeah.
And he did a cutout of me and my wife.
I love it.
I think this was before they were available to the public.
Yeah.
I don't think there were very many. I don't think there were any on opening day. No cutouts.
Okay.
But he did a cutout for me, and he put me somewhere out of view of the cameras. So he claims my streak has never ended because I was there in a cutout.
I think
because I say I've been to 57.
Yeah.
Well, this year will be my 58th if I include that year.
Well, we have to include
maybe
it.
we should include that.
How was the likeness? Do you have
know, the likeness, my wife looked really good.
Did she?
You know, mine, I always say pictures don't lie.
Well.
So the likeness was not as good as I imagine it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Were you taller?
I tried to avoid mirrors, if at all possible. But, you know, that was going to be their year, 2020.
Yeah.
You got Castellanos.
Oh, my gosh.
You got Miley. You got Moustakas.
Mm-hmm.
And then we end up with a 60-game season.
Mm-hmm.
They did thrash the Tigers that night.
Yeah.
And, you know, people were looking for parties for opening day. So we did have a Zoom cocktail party.
Oh, that's nice.
I believe I think it was July, I want to say 27th of 2020.
Yeah. Okay.
How many times has there been a ninth opening day?
That's a great question. Well, now you're going to demonstrate that you have forgotten more than I know. But I'm going to say, just guessing one.
One other one, right?
Yeah.
It's the famous year when ESPN made Marge have
a night
opening night, and she kind of refused to do it. And we had the parade the next day. She didn't have any bunting up, anything like that for opening night. It was kind of a disaster. There were only 30,000 people at opening night. And then the next day we had opening day.
Okay.
So there have been 2 night first games of the season, I guess.
And
right?
were you were there?
I was.
Okay.
It was a weird feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like that COVID year. Remember when they had they would essentially take I don't know what these things are called, but it's those thick plastic strips that the seats were sort of, you couldn't pull the seat down, right? So they like kept the seat in an upright position to allow the 6 feet separation.
Right.
So that was also strange. I'm like, I can't high five anybody here.
Yeah.
If I do, I'm going to have to reach over several seats, probably hurt myself. But nobody wanted to high five you during COVID anyhow. So it was weird in that regard too. The celebration wasn't there.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. There were only 12,000 people at the opening day in 2020 because of the separation, all that stuff. So it's kind of weird. That was probably the smallest opening day crowd since like the Palace of the Fans in 1915 or 16 or 17 before Crosley Field.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, yeah, that was weird.
But yet the team, shortened season, 60 games, but the team made it to the playoffs eventually, right? Had a decent year, finished up to the playoffs, around 500. And then I think we didn't score against Atlanta.
I know.
That was sad. But
well, the playoffs really demonstrated their weakness that year. They had that great pitching. Trevor Bauer had a great season.
Yeah.
Miley had a great season. But the team that year, think about this. They made the playoffs, and they had the lowest batting average in Major League Baseball since 1910.
Oh, my gosh.
So it was 110 years since a team had a lower batting average. Their batting average in 2020 for the season was 210.
That is abysmal. And it really showed up in the playoffs, didn't it?
Right. They got completely shut down in the playoffs.
Oh, my gosh. And I want to say one of those, maybe it was Bauer in the first game, but I think it was 1-0. So the pitching still showed up.
Yeah.
It was a microcosm of the season.
It really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was sad. I remember being really excited about that and didn't really care. If you're a true fan, you don't care if it's a shortened season. You just want to see us in the playoffs, after.
Oh, it was exciting.
Yeah, because it had been 13 or 14?
Yeah, 2013. We had that one game against the Pirates.
Oh, okay. Yep.
The brutal loss to the Giants in 2012 when we were up in San Francisco, 2-0.
Yeah.
Had to win 1 out of 3 in Cincinnati, and Matt Latos choked in Game 5, and Brandon Phillips
stretched that double into a triple. Yeah, I was there.
Anyway, that's Cincinnati, but isn't that perfect? They sign all those guys, and then it gets derailed by COVID.
Oh gosh, that's
and so we were all excited about the next year, right?
Yep.
It's just crazy.
Yeah. And then 21 was a nice year, right? With the rookies coming in with India and Stevenson, I believe, and we started to see some promise. I felt like we got some young leaders coming through here, and I think that showed up in opening day as well.
Well, I misspoke a few minutes ago. They had nobody at opening day in 2020.
Oh, was it 0?
0.
Okay.
Right? And so in 2021, it's the year that they had 12,000 people in the ballpark.
Okay. Boy, I think we just repressed that. We don't even want to think about it.
Right.
Gosh.
Yeah, 2020, there was nobody in the stands the whole year, right? And in 2021 is when we started.
Yeah. That makes sense, right? Because you wouldn't have real people next to cardboard cutouts.
Right.
Hopefully.
It was the Cardinals again.
Yeah. Although I'd like to see 2 Randys out there.
Yeah, exactly.
You and your cutout.
That would be a little scary. And then, that's just, we have all this hope from the previous season, all that great pitching, and they got whacked by the Cardinals. 2021, the game was over by the bottom of the first inning, despite our hope, and there's no clock. But they were down 6-0 in the top of the first. So that was another strange one. So you had 2020, no fans. 2021, 12,000 with the 6-foot distance and the things over the chairs. No high-fiving.
Yeah.
There was no parade that year again in 2021, but the banks, I remember being down there and thinking, this is the strangest thing. They're only going to allow 12,000 of us in here. But it was pretty wall-to-wall in the banks. Some people had masks on.
Yeah.
Some people didn't. So outside the stadium, it felt fairly normal.
Sure.
But then they were like, only 12,000 of you folks can come in.
We prefer that you get COVID outside of the stadium.
Correct. And that's the crazy year also, where because of all of that, when they ultimately opened up the stadium or the ballpark to full capacity in June, I believe, they had a reopening day. It was strange. They tried to recreate another real opening day with 40,000 fans, right? And, they didn't have the parade because it takes too much time to prepare for the parade and all that. And the Lucan family didn't want to do the parade. But it was kind of back to normal, in a sense, in June of 2021. And guess what happened with the reopening day? Rained out.
Ouch.
So that kind of hurt.
Yeah.
So they kind of, I don't even think they did a reopening day. What the next, because right after the reopening day they were going to do on June 2nd of 2021, I think they went to Milwaukee for a 3-game series. And I think by that time everybody was kind of like, okay, you can try this reopening day business, but it's not going to work. Right.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of bagged it.
Sure. Yeah. You're just putting a fancy name on another game now. And let's just pray for a win, and doesn't matter what we call it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it was a Castellini's idea necessarily. I think that was more of a Mayor John Cranley idea to try to stir up some interest in opening day.
Yep.
But they had an okay season in 2021. They finished, I think, in 3rd place. They were over 500.
Yeah, I felt like that was the year where we started to see, I think fans were getting excited about some promise of some youth that came in that we felt, that didn't cost us a lot of money. Eventually might, and hopefully that's what you want, because the performance was there and it warrants that type of money, as long as we can keep them. And I just remember being really excited about the youth of the team. Yeah. And that both and across the board. And it felt like, well, we've got some young power, we've got some young speed, and we've got some young arms. And maybe this can, result in something over time. And then that leads us to the last couple of years where I think it demonstrated itself, right?
Right. Well, 2022, so we had no fans 2020, 12,000 because of social distancing in 2021. So we're kind of excited about 2022, of course. And what happens? It was a 3rd consecutive weird year, because that's the year the millionaires and the billionaires decided to have their arguments about the collective bargaining agreement. The owners locked out the players. And guess what? For only the 6th or 7th time in Cincinnati's history, the Reds have to open on the road because the season got pushed back 7 or 10 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
We actually had to have our party as a watch party, the Reds Community Fund party, which is normally on opening day eve. For the first time was on opening day, but the problem was it was in Atlanta. So we had all these people out of the Reds Youth Academy in Bond Hill, and we watched the Reds play the Atlanta Braves, and it was really one of the better parties we've had because we had the game on. We still had the DJ and everything, so we had music and dancing and all that. And the Reds surprisingly won. They weren't expected to win that game, right?
Yeah.
Atlanta was pretty tough.
They were.
And the Reds actually go down there and win.
Mm-hmm.
And then they came back, a week later and had opening day here as if, they hadn't played the other games.
Right.
We treated it just like normal. It was back to normal. 2022 is finally back to normal. We went to Arnold's in the morning. You get there, you line up about, 8 o'clock or so. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever been there, but you need to put it on your list.
Yeah. I have been there. I don't know if I've been to Arnold's. I don't know if I've been there for opening day.
You've got to get there in the morning.
I think after the game I've been there, but not before the game.
I believe it's the oldest bar in Cincinnati. At least it may not have been the first, but I think it's the oldest.
The oldest still standing.
Yeah, and they always have live music, and they've got people doing the Who's on First routine.
Oh, yeah.
And Casey at the bat, all that kind of good stuff. It's a great time. We've gone down there, and you just kind of roll in the opening day. You start at 8 a.m., maybe you have a Bloody Mary, maybe you have a beer. We always go to the Red Fox Grill on 6th Street. Our family gathers there. If anybody wants to come this year, you're welcome. Emma Watson will be our server. Great food, 10:30, Red Fox Grill. That's our family tradition.
So by 10:30, this is your second stop already.
Second stop.
Okay, love it.
Yeah. Well, you never want to get to the Red Fox as your first stop.
Well, that's fair.
So there you have it. But 2022, we finally came back to normal in Cincinnati for opening day.
Yeah.
Usual hoopla, the parade.
You know what's wild about those years? Those sort of, as I'm hearing you now take me through 19 through 22 now, I think the super fans, we repress that stuff. I don't even, as you're talking about now, it's all coming back to me. But I had sort of forgotten about it. I think that's what makes Cincinnati and Reds fans unique, is that we don't really bash our team like I hear some of the other cities do. Are there people out there that do? Sure, but the greater majority is revitalized every year. And we just are so excited about opening day that we forget everything that happened. If it's bad, we forget it. If it's great, we remember it.
That's so true.
And that's what you love about this town and this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to say it, 2022 was another loss. They tried to come back and win it, but the bullpen blew it at the end of the game. David Bell was criticized afterward for his bullpen decisions, but so be it. On opening day, you kind of walk out there, okay, it's only 1 out of 162.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of baseball left.
We begin rationalization as soon as they lose.
Right. Well, of course, the undefeated season is over early, but that's okay,
right.
No one's pulled that off yet. So.
Last year was a great game too. 2023, we were back to normal, but we did lose late. But I think what we're hoping now is you think of who was not on that team.
Yeah.
Ellie De La Cruz was not on that team.
That's right.
Matt McClain, Edwin Encarnacion, Noel V. Marte.
Yes.
You can kind of go down the list. So hope springs eternal.
It does.
For 2024. The good news is we're back to normal.
Yep.
There's no labor strife. I think we can party like there's no tomorrow, the night before opening day.
Absolutely.
At the Moorline Lager House.
Yeah, party like it's 2024.
Dan, I tell you what, this has been so great, Dan.
Always enjoyable talking to you, buddy.
I like when I did my book, I like to talk about history. And I was thinking about talking about history because the title of my book was The History of Reds Opening Day. But I was kind of using it in a nuanced way, I guess, because every chapter or every year I talked about what was going on in the world. We've had assassinations around opening day. We've had world wars that have affected opening days. This year we had nothing like that other than the lockout season, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of news about that.
Sure.
In 19, we had the Robert Mueller investigation conclude right before opening day. I think in 20 or 21, I'm trying to remember, John Lewis, who was a great civil rights leader, died that weekend before opening day. In 22, as the players were waging war against the owners, Russia was invading Ukraine. So there's a lot of history. It's weird when I did my research when I was doing that book, how many significant events seem to happen around opening day.
Yes.
So
yeah, that is wild.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I, listening to your podcast and producing your show that those came to light for me. And I'm just praying that we get out of this year unscathed with, none of the negative stuff going on. All positive this year. Our country's been through a lot. The world has been through a lot. Would love to just kick this thing off with a big Reds win and carry it on throughout the year. There's one thing that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
Before
I'm all ears.
Okay, because you've been talking to your listeners now for some 25 episodes, right, about the history of opening day in Cincinnati, but we didn't really talk about your Randy's history per se. Yeah, you've talked about some of the things that you do, but how did you become so passionate about the Cincinnati Reds, and what's your story in terms of how you were compelled to be the guy that went to 58 straight opening days? Why?
Right. I always wonder about that, Dan, but I think once you get on a streak like this, you've got to continue it, right? Come hell or high water, I'm going to be at opening day. It started, I was lucky. I was in that generation of, when I was 4 years old, the Reds went to the World Series. Now, I don't particularly recall that World Series against the Yankees. But then we had all these guys coming up. When I was a little kid, I'm 6 years old, and there's Pete Rose playing. Then I'm 8 or 9 years, we get Tony Perez.
Yeah.
10 years old, Johnny Bench, Lee May. And they were competitive in the late 60s when I was just 11 or 12 years old. And a friend of mine, Jack Greiner, says, that's when you really become a rabid fan, is when you're in 5th or 6th or 7th grade and your team is good. And so it was easy. And my dad was a big Reds fan. We didn't go to a lot of games when I was a kid. We used to go to 29th doubleheaders because my dad liked the BOGO deals, right? He liked buy one, get one. And we'd go down to Crosley Field, 5 o'clock at night. You'd see a 29th doubleheader, 2 games for one, and we'd be back in Finneytown by 10:30 back in those days. And then the Big Red Machine comes. He took me to my first opening day in 1967. And he worked in the Gwynn building. He worked for Yellow Pages.
Okay.
He was a Yellow Page salesman. And so the little, what do you call that greasy spoon down the street was called Red Fox Grill. And he took me to the Red Fox Grill in 1967. And I haven't been to the Red Fox Grill on opening day for 58 years, but we have been for the last 42 maybe.
Still pretty good.
Since I got out of law school. And my wife and I started going opening day together. We always start the day at Red Fox after maybe making a detour to Arnold's Grill, Bar and Grill on 8th Street. So that's what got it. My dad, and, I grew up with Big Red Machine. I was spoiled. I feel so bad for this generation of youth in Cincinnati. We haven't had a lot of success. The Bengals at least got to the Super Bowl. Yeah. The Reds haven't been to the World Series since 1990, but that was a hell of a year too. But
yeah,
we could go on and on. But that's kind of my opening day story, and I used to drag people down from the University of Dayton or Ohio State to go to opening day.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. I can see your dad telling you, Randy, when you start something, you got to stick with it. Don't give up. Don't let up.
Well, and it was great. It's become a real family tradition where on opening day this year, we'll probably have 25 or so family members all seated together, and it's fantastic. That's why I think people think it's like Christmas. It's a time for families and friends to get together. And, I don't remember, I truly, without doing a little research, I didn't remember much about last year's opening day game, right? Mm-hmm. But I remember the people I was with.
Yeah.
And I can kind of picture in my mind everybody out there and chatting and drinking and eating and having a good time. I can still picture that, but I can't picture much about the game.
Yeah.
Well,
it's America's pastime, right?
That's right.
And I think that's how we spend our pastime, typically with family. And those are the memories. Those are the things that stick, obviously. We shared a lot of those kind of stories today. I shared some of mine. You have decades of history, and it's beautiful to hear. It's heartwarming. And for the people that say that, maybe baseball isn't fast enough for them or baseball is boring, they need to understand really what baseball is about. And it's not just about the game on the field. It's about the relationships. and
right. There's 162 games. Yep. There's nothing better than going down to the ballpark on a summer evening with a couple of friends and just chatting it up and having a good time. And yes, you want the Reds to win, but it's not the end of the world. There's 161 other games. So, it's an opening day is, as I said before, is Cincinnati's greatest non-religious holiday. So, Dan, I think I've ended other episodes quoting my favorite baseball announcer.
Let's do it.
So, in the immortal words of Marty Brenneman, so long, everybody.